a Neuromoss Media production. Today, we are thrilled to welcome the USA Today bestselling author, Renee Carlino, to talk about her newest book that released on August 18th, Before We Were Strangers. She's also the author of Sweet Thing, Sweet Little Thing, Nowhere But Here, and After the Rain. Welcome, Renee. It's so good to talk to you today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited.
Good, we are too, and we can't wait to discuss Before We Were Strangers. So let's get right into it. Tell us maybe a little bit about it and the backstory and some of the inspiration behind it.
Sure. Before We Were Strangers is a love story about two people who meet in college and fall in love and then are torn apart and see each other 15 years later on a New York subway. Um, it follows mostly Matt's story and how he is trying to get in touch with Grace again after all this time apart. It's a story of misconnections and miscommunications and second chances. So we called it a love-hate love story.
And what about kind of how you came up with it and the story behind that and the inspiration?
Misconnection post my editor sent to me had a similar theme of two people. Misconnections is a section on Craigslist that
Okay.
is for if you see someone in public and you make eyes at them or something and don't have the guts to ask them for their phone number, you can write a post and usually there's a description of what you're wearing and where you met. And so we found one that was unique because it was a plea from a man to a woman who he had been with in college and had been separated from for many years. And we were just really inspired by that. I was personally really inspired by the idea of having a second chance and these two people being available at the same time after so many years. Um, it just really got the ball rolling and it became its own story once I started developing their college years together, and then the present came pretty easily to me. So it's a past
Is
and
there
present story.
anything from your own life that you felt you could pull from, or any kind of missed connection that you've had that you kind of said, yeah, like I can relate?
I did. I mean, I've run into people from my past and always, and I'm the type of person who wonders what people are doing, people who I haven't seen in a really long time. Facebook is something we have now to sort of solve that. But I think it's a romantic idea. I don't necessarily think these are common occurrences. My mom did re-meet her current husband at her 40-year high school reunion. So she knew him
Yeah.
when they were younger, and then they re-met at their 40-year reunion, and they're married now and have been married for a while. So there are instances in my life, yes, but in personally for me, no, that didn't happen. But yeah, I do wonder for other people what that might be like.
And were you at the time you were looking for ideas for a book when your agent sent this to you, or you saw it and thought, you know what, this could be a book?
My editor sent it to me actually. Were we were trolling Post Secret and Misconnections. We were trying to think of an idea that would be a second chance romance, but something a little more unique, something that had um, a theme of technology in it and sort of the also I was dying to write something in New York again and dying to write something in the 90s when I was in college and so I felt like this would be the perfect opportunity and a misconnection is so current and the idea of Craigslist and finding somebody that way seemed like a really current interesting idea and so that's where the inspiration came from. As far as the photography and the music aspect of it, that definitely came from my own personal. I was a photography minor in college and majored in cinematography, and so I took a lot of that for my college years and a lot of the experiences and events that were happening in that time musically and even just politically and tried to incorporate them into the book.
Definitely. Um, how do you think Before We Were Strangers is different from your other books?
I usually describe Before We Were Strangers as more of a mature book. The characters are older when we start. I enjoyed writing characters that were similar to my age. My last three books, the characters were younger in their 20s and going through that time in your 20s when there's a lot of self-discovery and trying to figure out what your career is going to be and who you're going to
Right.
marry. And I was more interested in exploring late 30s and what a person feels like in their late 30s and if they have regrets or if they wonder about their past or people that were in their past. And so
Right.
that was a big theme.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I think we all can relate to, that's for sure.
Yeah.
In what ways, uh, if any, have you kind of noticed as you've written a change in your writing style or in the way you maybe go about it because you're doing it more often, you're finding better, more efficient ways or changing things up? Is there anything that you've noticed over the years?
I think since just from the time that I started writing creatively, which was when I was very young until now, is that once I had children, I was much more focused on time, and that allowed me to complete something. I had a lot of
Right.
works in progress when I finished my first book. So once I knew that I had, a set number of hours to go into a room and write, which I won't say that that's the most conducive thing to someone's creativity,
Right.
but for me it worked because it forced me to finish something. And I always wanted to see resolution for all of my stories, but it definitely allowed me to write more fluidly and get a certain number of words that I knew I would need to finish a book in a certain number of months, let's say. Once I got deadlines, then it became more based on the deadlines. But as far as from book to book, as far as the books that I have published, I would say that what's changed is I've focused more on story and big picture than so much on
Right.
scene and I'm looking for more inspiration, and maybe my first couple of books came more from personal experience, whereas now I'm looking sort of outside of myself at other people's experiences and trying to find inspiration that way. Um, so yeah, it's changed. I also feel like my mistakes. Um, I'm more aware of mistakes that I made in my earlier
Yeah.
books now when I write, which can hinder your flow, but I feel like it also improves the fluidity of the writing. So
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned that you've been writing from an early age, and your website also says that you were a seventh grade English teacher. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and maybe how you got to the point where you decided to just go for it and become an author?
sure, I did. I was a seventh grade English teacher for 5 years, about 5 years. Before that, I had gotten, like I said, a cinematography film degree, and I thought that I would work in the film industry. My husband works in the film industry. We both were working right out of college at the time. I was working in development, and we were we had very long hours, and we rarely saw each other. So I decided to go back to school and get my teaching credential, and then I became a teacher. And while I was teaching, I was always writing. I wrote screenplays mostly, but I did write a lot of short stories and poems and stuff like that.
Right.
So I was writing creatively the whole time, and then while I was teaching, I fell in love with the novel, just the idea of the novel and conflict and the way it's resolved and the way we're so attached to characters because there's development over a long period of time as far as pages goes. So I fell in love with that again. I was teaching seventh grade. There were a lot really inspirational moments to see kids' eyes light up when they understood what plot was. I know that sounds very
Right.
technical, but when they understood how they could discover plot in something that they liked and discover all the elements of story in a particular piece. And so when I stopped teaching to have my kids, that's when I got, like I said, more focused on time. I still write scripts, but I love novel writing. I love how rich it can be and how rich it is in my mind and the freedom that it gives a writer to describe everything, that they want to
Yeah.
describe in the scene. So yeah, I love it.
So That's amazing. That's so interesting. It's nice to hear the passion behind it. Just a quick note to all of our viewers. I see we've got some viewer questions stacking up at the bottom of the screen. We will get to those at the end, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. Um, as far as the music, you were mentioning that you're a music lover, and it plays a part in your writing. How does it affect maybe your style or your process?
Well, I'm always listening to music while I'm writing. I've found that I will listen to the same song over and over again. And usually I try to listen to music that has that where the lyrics are obscure because if I can if it's a very catchy hook, I'll find myself writing that into the book by accident. So I usually listen to atmospheric rock, which doesn't really have any lyrics, or I'll listen to something where it's hard to understand what they're saying. But yeah, I've been a music lover always. I love the way that music adds to. I feel like because I have a film background, I'm always picturing my books as films, and I love the way that music can add and also take away from a scene in a film. Um,
Uh,
so I think that I will use music to give the picture more depth in my mind, and then
yeah.
also music can be really evocative, and that will get me sort of feeling sorry for the character, or feeling mad at the character, and wanting
Right.
to describe that.
Do you, one thing that's on your website is this always changing playlist, and it goes along with your current book. Is this something that the playlist that's currently up there, is that one that was the inspiration for your writing, or one that you think goes with the story from beginning to end that you maybe put together after?
It's definitely a mixture. There were songs on the playlist that were songs that I listened to while I was writing, and then there were also songs that I referenced in the book that were more period related to that period in time, the 90s, the late
Right.
90s. Um, and also, like I said, songs that I listened to are songs where I thought that the lyrics were had related to the story in some way. I also do like Pinterest boards
Yep.
that, and a lot of times when I'm looking for imagery, I'll use those to get ideas for a scene, you know. But yeah, definitely the music. I think that playlist I always sort of create while I'm doing it, and then we'll add after the story is finished.
Okay.
So yeah, a little of
Very
both.
interesting. Do you have a couple from the playlist right now that are maybe your favorites or go along to one of your favorite scenes?
There is a well, definitely Hallelujah, the Jeff Buckley song. I mean, I reference Jeff Buckley in all of my books. He's a huge, he's probably the, I guess a lot, used for a lot of artists, just because of his story and also his art that he created. But there are, yeah, gosh, I mean, every song on there, there's definitely a Pixies song that I had in my mind a lot while I was
Hmm.
writing because I remember that era and or I don't want to say era, but I remember those few years where I was listening to that song a lot, and then also that Pearl Jam 10 album, which was we heard everywhere all the time on
Right.
MTV. I thought that was a good symbol because of the way I describe MTV sort of changing over the years and how Matt's changed and New York's changed and there's been so
Yeah.
many changes and sometimes it's hard to remember that we didn't have cell phones and things like that and communication was different. So yeah.
Interesting. Um, you talk also about your love of cities and the different cities that you've been to. Are there ones that are on your bucket list that you have yet to get to, or what are some of your favorite ones that you've already been to?
I mean, New York is definitely up there in my top cities. I lived in Los Angeles for a long time, so LA, I feel close to LA in a way because I'm familiar with it. I'm familiar with New York, so I've been there many times. I loved visiting Chicago. My second book, Nowhere But Here, takes place in Chicago. I would love to go to Paris. I've been to Europe and I've been to cities like Madrid and Barcelona, I would absolutely love to go and just go to all the major cities
Yeah.
and do that kind of thing. Um, but let's see. I mean, Anywhere. I have the travel bug, so I'd love to travel anywhere. But yes, New York. I describe New York as a great character to use in another interview because depending on where you're at in New York, you can feel very united with the
Hmm.
people, and there's this sense of that this togetherness, and it's also very isolating because of the tall buildings,
Yeah.
and sometimes the sunshine won't even get through those buildings. So there are a lot of facets to New York with the subway and the history, and so it's a great character to use. But I love writing about other cities too. I need to visit. I need to visit more and get more
Right.
fuel.
How do you decide which cities you're going to use for what book, or is it more of like an organic process where it just kind of comes to you?
I remember, like with Nowhere But Here, the reason why I chose Chicago was because of the L, and the trains and transportation are,
Right.
I feel, in California we don't have that public transportation. It's not prominent here because of how spread out it is. So
Okay.
I always feel like that's a great place for a character to sit and think, or and be stuck close to other people. Um, and lots of cities in Europe are like that too, where you're sort of wedged into a small area with strangers, and I find that that gives me a lot of ideas. So that was why I chose that. And yeah, I think, but other than that, I think it is random, or it's just where I
Okay.
want to be. So yeah.
Okay. What about the idea of imaginary friends and characters and getting into those characters? Um, you've said on your website that they play an important role for you in writing your books. How how did they affect your writing process? And do you, I know some authors talk about how the character kind of takes over at a certain point. Or do you always feel like you're in control of the character, or do you have to kind of let them do their thing as far as your writing
I
process?
I definitely always feel in control of the character when I am writing. Yeah, I did have imaginary friends. I've said this. I that it's kind of terrifying to remember what your imaginary friends look like
Right.
when you're an adult. So I had a very vivid imagination. I know I still have a vivid imagination. I think that people that know me would probably describe me as sort of head in the clouds most of the time, although I can be very serious. But I do drift off into my little dreamland a lot. Um, with the characters, what happens, and I'm sure that my close friends could attest to this, is that once the book is finished, then they sort of become their own people. So when I talk about the characters, I'll say, well, then Will did this to me.
Right.
And it will feel like I'm talking about separate people, but while I'm writing, I feel totally in control. I don't imagine them doing things where I'm going, no, don't do that, stop.
Okay.
That would
Right,
be
right.
a little strange, but yeah, I guess that would be a great quality to have if you could actually let it go. But most of the time, I feel like I'm making the characters do what I want them to do, and it's
Okay.
like the ultimate. It's like the ultimate control. Like when you're reading,
Right.
I get the same sense when I'm writing. It's like a choose your own adventure or something. I get to decide how it ends, so it's a lot of
Absolutely.
fun.
Very fun. We have a question from Diane. She says, I would love to see the movie version of Before We Were Strangers. Who would be your top picks to cast as Matt and Grace?
Hi, Diane. Yes, I would love to see it as a movie also.
I
I haven't
think
thought
we all would.
about I know. I haven't thought about actors or actresses specifically. I I don't even have a clue. They're sort of their own person in my mind, and the way that they look, they don't really look like anyone that exists. Um, but uh, I mean, yeah, I don't know.
A tricky one.
I'll have to think about that one. It is tricky. Yeah, it is tricky. I feel like there's time in between, but I would love to if I were making this film, I would love to find characters that could play both 21-year-old and a 36-year-old. I think that would be the
Oh,
ultimate
interesting.
test of seeing
Yeah.
characters
Yeah,
who
definitely.
are able to do that. So I think Ryan Gosling has done that. He did that in Blue Valentine pretty
Mhm.
well, where he played the younger version and then an older version of himself. Um, and Michelle Williams obviously is a great actress. So now that I
Definitely.
think about it, she might be a good pick for that. Someone that has an effervescent way about them for
Mhm.
Grace for sure, and a male character that has a seriousness but who is lighthearted at times too. So
Yeah. As a
great
follow-up to
question. I'll have
that,
to think on that.
As a follow-up to that, Rachel is asking, would you ever option any of your other books for film, maybe Sweet Thing or After the Rain even?
Yeah, I would option all of my books for films. I have a film. I come from the film world, so I would love, and I imagine them that way. And I'm not particularly stuck on any one thing as far as how it would translate into a film. I know that film, I see film and literature very separately. So I don't. I'm usually sort of. I'm not the type of person to read a book and then say, "Oh, that was a terrible remake of the book." I usually try to look at them as two separate mediums and um, you know, just shoot, apples to oranges. So
Right.
I would love to see them made. I would love to see how those stories are interpreted through a filmmaker's eyes. So that's a great question.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Now, would you, just staying on that topic for a minute, would you feel like, as far as working with a screenwriter, would you want control of that? I know there's some authors who like to stay pretty close vested to their stories, and then others who just kind of let it go off. Sometimes it doesn't
I'm
always work,
I'm
sometimes it
like
does.
I'm a pretty collaborative person. I was just talking to my editor about cover, and I said I want to see what the artists come up with because um so I think I would love to let it go out into the world and see what someone could do with it. Of course,
Yeah,
I'd want to thoroughly vet the the person doing it, but
absolutely.
I mean it wouldn't be it would to me. I've done my part. I write scripts, and I've never really thought about writing those scripts into novels except for After the Rain, which I found extremely difficult to do. So After the Rain was a screenplay first, and then I wrote it as a novel. I felt it
Oh,
very difficult to do. So I can't really, I don't see those two things together. I feel like when I'm into the novel writing, that I'm really into it, and the screen, it's something totally different. So, but of course, I would love to see the essence of those and the characters. You know what I mean? I would love to
right.
see that on film. So I'd love to see what someone else could do with it. I'm sort of, I'm good with it as a novel.
Okay.
So yeah.
Denise asks, which one of your characters is more like you?
Um, Out of all of the characters, strangely, I felt like Matt was the most, maybe sort of trying to hang on to the past. Sometimes I find myself reminiscing or nostalgic about certain periods of my life, or at times cynical. I wrote Grace the way I wrote Grace because I wanted um, to be more like Grace. I wanted
Right.
to have more of a bounce in my step and be a little bit more lighthearted and just try to let go and have fun. I tend to be a little bit more controlled. So maybe Matt in that particular book. In all of my books, I mean, if you ask my husband, he would say Kate from Nowhere But Here.
Mm.
So I mean, but they're all little bits of me, even down to the old man, who makes instruments in the music store. They're all little bits of me and people that I know. So it's hard to say which is the most like me.
Okay. JJ says, hi, Renee. You've written for television before. Is the process at all like writing a novel? Do you find either style of writing more gratifying than the other from a writer's point of view?
I definitely find writing novels more gratifying. I would find writing scripts gratifying if they were made into actual films or TV
Right.
shows. I think that's where that, but scripts are technical and there's not the freedom to describe for description. That's left to the filmmaker mostly. So scripts are mainly made up of dialogue and a little bit of direction. I love writing dialogue, but I really like to write mannerisms and things that are happening in
Okay.
between dialogue exchanges and the character's inner thoughts, which that is usually interpreted by a filmmaker or by an actor. So yeah, I love writing novels. I find that more gratifying than writing scripts. But I would love to see a script made into, a picture so that I think that's where
Yeah,
you would feel that, yeah.
absolutely. What about back to the music a little bit? What's the most played song right now that you write to? Is there one that's on repeat? Adding to that.
I think that one song I probably listen to over and over and over again with all of my book, like I will go back to it, is a song called Human Qualities by Explosions in the Sky. So I listen
Oh,
to that song a lot. It has a like a crescendo, like it has a very big guitar part, but after a really long slow moving section. So I feel like that it's evocative in that way and gets the creative juices flowing. So yeah, I listen to that song a lot. I listen to a
okay.
lot of L1011 and Explosions in the Sky, atmospheric rock stations and stuff. So
Fun. That question was from
yeah,
Book Baristas. And we'll take one more viewer question. Hi, Renee. This is Whitney. Who would you say is your biggest influence as a writer?
that's a great question. I can't say that there is one single person, writer, author that's an influence, that is the biggest influence. I read everything. I try to read as much as I can when I'm not writing. Um, so that's tough. I think that I'm more inspired by just the idea of a love story.
Okay.
So it, I can get inspiration from TV and film and music and stuff. I can't think of a writer. I've said Kurt Vonnegut before. I just love his quotes. I love his attitude. Loved his attitude, the attitude he had at times, and at times I did. I mean, it's just uh, as far as in my own genre, I'm a big fan of the Outlander books and historical romance, but I haven't written any of those, so that wouldn't be an accurate wouldn't be accurate to say that that's a big influence. But I do love the
Okay.
historical romance and historical
Do you
fiction.
have a maybe a to be read list on your nightstand right now? A couple that you're dying to jump into?
I I Gosh, I mean, I have a million books. There's nothing I'm
Yeah,
looking forward
don't we all?
to. Yeah, I'm looking forward to Colleen Hoover's November 9. I'm a big fan of hers, and
Yeah.
lots of other authors that are in my genre that are writing great books. And then and yes, I also am looking forward to the Caroline Kepney's book. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but After You.
Mhm.
So Hidden Bodies. I want to read that. That's another one. I
Okay.
really enjoyed You. So a couple of books. Yeah.
Very fun. What about for yourself? Can you give us a little hint or insight into any new books that you have coming up or things that you're working on now?
Sure. I have two books finished. The one is scheduled for release in early May. It was April and it got pushed to May. It's been done for a while now, but we're just trying to work out some of the fine details. That's called
Okay.
Swear on This Life, and that
Oh,
is a story of a girl who discovers that she's the inspiration of this literary sort of I don't want to say masterpiece, but this literary sensation,
okay.
this novel that comes out, and so she goes searching for the author, um, who was her childhood friend. And then after that, I have a book that's tentatively titled Wish You Were Here that is slated for fall 2016 release, and that's also done too. It's in the very early stages of editing, so and that's what I'm working on right now. And then I'm also
Okay.
working on another TV pilot. So a few things
Wow.
going on at once, but yeah, there are
Yeah,
two books that I'm excited about. So
that's very exciting. We have a little bit of time left for a little section that we like to call rapid fire. So a little this or that, whatever comes to mind first when I give you two options. What would you rather read, fiction or nonfiction?
fiction, definitely, yeah, yep, fiction.
Hardcover or paperback?
Well, would I love to see my books in a hardcover? Yes. Do I like reading a paperback? It's a little bit easier. I actually read on my phone,
Okay.
onto my iPad a lot. So
That was my
yeah, but I
next,
love
ebook or hard copy.
I probably read more ebooks, but I do love to
Okay.
have a book in my hands. And I take more books to the beach, and I spend a lot of time at the beach, so I take more paperbacks to the beach. So
Okay.
I like the feel of the pages in my hand, but I
Okay.
read a lot, so I read on ebook too.
Yeah, I enjoy both too. I can't kind of pick one or the other. When you write your books, longhand or do you use computer?
Yeah, I use the computer. I don't even actually like to write anything at all with a pen. I think because I type so much, I have like kind of a stiff sort of signature and penmanship. So I
Okay.
actually type most everything that I write, and yeah, I write it.
Interesting.
I start writing a book from the beginning, and then I mean, typing it, I should say. So it's
Okay.
always typed.
Do you prefer writing in a private or a public setting?
Definitely private. I've never written in a Starbucks or on a
Right.
bus or on a train or
Okay.
even in a car. I've never, even when someone else is driving, I've never been able to do that. I usually write in my room and where it's quiet and
Okay. If you could
music
jump
is about it.
into, oh yeah, definitely. If you could jump into one of your books, which one would you want to be in and what character?
I think I said Kate because I was thinking being
Right.
on a winery with Jamie and thought that sounded thought that sounded really cool. Just but actually all of them. I would love, part of the reason why I write books like this is because I want to experience these things, and maybe I have experienced them and I want to relive them. So yeah, definitely all of the books, but I would love to go visit a winery and have a private tour of that. So that would be nice.
Very nice, very nice. Well, I can't thank you enough, Renee, for your time today.
Thank
We have
you.
unfortunately reached the end of our time together with our viewers, but you can certainly find this again on booktrib.com. And thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Renee.
Hey, thank
Bye.
you. All right. Bye.